by telling the story of how Jesus the Savior was born. Every person you see on the stage tonight represents a biblical character, except for me. I am merely the narrator. And as we share with you the story of Jesus' birth, there is going to be some audience participation involved. So if you see the PowerPoint saying, "Everyone together," I want to invite you to rise and say the words out loud with us. And if someone begins to worship by singing, we want to invite you to sing along. And I'm being told that my microphone is not on. Sorry about that. So if anyone starts to worship by singing, we want to invite you to sing along. The story of Jesus' birth has humble beginnings. It begins in a little town called Nazareth. Luke tells the story this way. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration when Quirinius was governor of Syria. And all went to be registered, each to his own town. And Joseph also went out from Galilee, from the town of Nazareth, to Judea, to the city of David, which should be called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be registered with Mary, his betrothed, who was with child. In the ancient past, all the way back to the days of Abraham, there was a major roadway which spanned from the Jezreel Valley, where the town of Nazareth is located, to the city of Jerusalem, and then goes beyond Jerusalem to the city called Bethlehem. In the days of Abraham gathered his forces together and confronted a group of rival kings using this road. And he defeated them in battle in order to rescue his nephew, Lot. From that time forward, because of those events, a small stretch of this road between Jerusalem and Bethlehem became known as the Valley of Kings, a fitting name for the route which Jesus, who was born as King of the Jews, would travel in his mother's womb down to the city of Bethlehem, the hometown of royal King David. The journey from Mary and Joseph and the preborn baby Jesus went something like this. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth, in the Roman province of Galilee, to the Roman province of Judea, to the town of Bethlehem. Notice how the text says that they went up. When we hear that word as 21st century Americans, we typically think of traveling north. In reality, however, Mary and Joseph and baby Jesus are traveling almost straight south. Why then does the text say that they went up? When we read that word up, the author is not talking about traveling north, but rather is speaking of going upwards in elevation. For indeed, the town of Nazareth is in the midst of the Jezreel Valley, and they would have had to travel several thousand feet upward in elevation to get to the main road connecting Nazareth to Jerusalem, and ultimately to Bethlehem. The distance between Nazareth and Bethlehem is roughly 70 miles as the crow flies. And yet this main road would take Mary and Joseph on top of a mountain range. So they'd have to travel on top of a mountain range, mountain after valley, going up and down and up and down. By the time we account for the winding of the roads in elevation, the distance between Nazareth and Bethlehem is roughly 80 miles. To put that into perspective, 80 miles is roughly the distance between where we are here at Cityview Church and downtown Rochester. And while some traditions say that Mary rode on a donkey, the biblical text says nothing about riding animals. Most likely the two of them were on foot. So those of you who are mothers, imagine this: traveling up a cliff, onto a mountain range, up and down, mountain and valley, 80 miles, on foot, in the third trimester of pregnancy, traveling with painful steps and slow. It was not an easy journey, but it gets still harder. Let's keep reading in Luke's account, continuing in verse 6. And while they were there, the time came for her to give birth. And she gave birth to her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling cloths, and laid him in a manger, because there was no place for them in the inn. When Mary and Joseph finally arrive at Bethlehem, they discover that the city is at full capacity. And Luke's gospel account tells us that there was no room for them in the inn. The Greek New Testament term, translated as inn from Luke 2:7, is katalumati, which can also be translated as the guest room. It is likely that Mary and Joseph were not turned away from an inn, but rather that the local people of Bethlehem had already offered their guest room to other travelers who had also come to Bethlehem on account of the census. Now, the Jewish people of Bethlehem, culturally speaking, would have felt an obligation to offer hospitality to their fellow Jewish neighbors. Therefore, when Mary and Joseph arrived, and the people of Bethlehem had no place to offer in terms of hospitality, this became a crisis for those who were honor-bound to offer shelter to their fellow Jewish neighbors. Therefore, when we are told that Mary and Joseph were put up in a stable, it accomplishes two things. Number one, the people of Bethlehem are vindicated in their honor for offering hospitality to fellow Jewish travelers despite the fact that the guest room was already full. And two, God had graciously provided for Mary and Joseph and the baby Jesus in a very particular way. We will shortly see how God miraculously caused this set of circumstances to occur, which would lead Mary to place the soon-to-be-born baby Jesus in a manger, which the shepherds who came to see him received as a sign. In order to set the scene for the stable at Bethlehem, we need to lay the proper groundwork. There is an ancient and little-known prophecy from Deuteronomy 18 in which God spoke to Moses and said these words, "I will raise up for them," that is, the people of Israel, "a prophet like you," that is, a prophet like Moses, "from among their brothers. And I will put my very words into his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And whoever will not listen to my words that he shall speak in my name, I myself will require it of him." Ever since that time, the chosen people of Israel were on the lookout for the prophet like Moses to arrive. Over 1,500 years later, after Jesus rose from the dead, the book of Acts records how the apostle Peter and a man named Stephen, who was the first man ever to be martyred for his Christian faith, quoted this very passage of Scripture and testified how Jesus Christ of Nazareth is indeed the prophet like Moses in fulfillment of Deuteronomy 18. It should not surprise us then, since Jesus is the prophet like Moses who was foretold long ago, that there are many striking similarities between the life and ministry of the prophet Moses and the life and ministry of Jesus Christ, the prophet like Moses. Therefore, as we set the scene for the Nativity, which is a historical term for the birthplace of Jesus, we are going to examine the story of Jesus' birth by looking for similarities between the birth and early life of Moses and the birth and early life of Jesus. It is with this comparison in mind that we would like to invite you this evening to examine the story of Jesus' birth and to begin to see it differently. We will examine each of the characters in the scene of the stable one by one, comparing the New Testament characters of the Christmas story to similar stories found in the Old Testament, so that the connections we are about to show you help us to understand who Jesus is and to better understand the gospel itself. First, as we set the scene, Mary and Joseph arrive in Bethlehem, and while they are there, Luke tells us that the time came and Mary gave birth to baby Jesus. In the background, however, in comparing the birth of Moses to the birth of Jesus in the Christmas story, we begin by looking at the character of Joseph. Joseph, of course, has a familiar sounding name to many of us because he shares the same name with another famous Israelite from the Old Testament, namely Joseph, the 11th son of Jacob. When we compare these two men, some interesting similarities can be seen in their life and ministry. Take a look.
My name is Joseph, the 11th son of Jacob, who was renamed Israel. As such, I am an Israelite. In my life, when I've faced trials of various kinds, God consistently delivered me from my troubles by revealing things to me in the form of dreams. I dreamed that sheaves of grain were bowing down to mine, and that the sun, moon, and stars bowed down to my star, foretelling how God would bring about a great deliverance for God's people, and that I would rule over my father, mother, and brothers. But when I shared this dream with my brothers, they became jealous and they sold me into slavery in Egypt. While I was in Egypt, I was placed in charge of the house of Potiphar. When Potiphar's wife, however, tried to seduce me, I was charged with a false allegation of misconduct. In the face of this false allegation, I chose to do what is honorable by fleeing from the house, leaving my cloak behind me. Even though I was innocent of any wrong, I was still sent into prison. While I was in prison, God eventually delivered me out of jail by allowing me to see and interpret still more dreams, allowing me to solve a riddle concerning Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker. One of these men remembered me, which gave me the opportunity to interpret still another dream for Pharaoh. This deliverance through dreams led to me being freed from prison, placed as second in command of Egypt, second only to Pharaoh himself. As second in command of Egypt, I ordered that the grain be stored in great warehouses, which God used to bring about a great deliverance, so there would be food for all to eat, including my family, during the 7 years of terrible famine. I was sold into slavery, and against my will, I was forced to go into the land of Egypt. There I was a slave, and many terrible things happened to me. Yet, in the end, I feared God, and I did what was right. And despite the fact that my brothers meant evil against me, God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. In this way, God brought about a great deliverance to his people through his miraculous work in my life.
My name is also Joseph, the son of another man named Jacob. I am a descendant of the tribe of Judah, and I am descended from the royal line of King David. Though royal, blood runs through my veins, I also face many trials. Throughout my life, I have lived under the oppressive rule of the Romans, and life has been hard. However, when I face trials, God has been faithful to me. I faced trials of various kinds, but like the other Joseph who came before me, God also delivered me out of my troubles by revealing things to me by dreams. I gave a pledge of marriage to my beloved Mary, and yet I found myself in a place where I faced public disgrace. Even though Mary and I were not yet fully married, and were not yet intimate, I found that Mary, my wife, was pregnant and expecting a child, but not by me. Like the other Joseph before me, I too faced a false allegation of misconduct. Even though I was innocent of any wrong, I resolved in my heart to do what I considered to be honorable. Therefore, I plan to divorce Mary quietly in order to avoid any exposure of public disgrace. However, while I considered this, an angel of the Lord was sent from God and appeared to me in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not fear to take Mary as your wife, for that which is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. Knowing that both Mary and I were innocent in this matter, I took Mary as my wife. When she gave birth to a son, we named him Jesus, as the angel had told us. Just like Joseph before me, during my life, God brought a great deliverance for the people of Israel. For Jesus was to save God's people from their sin. God also warned me in another dream to flee to Egypt, revealing to me that Herod was about to search for the child Jesus to destroy him. Therefore the angel said in a dream, Rise, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you. For Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him. So I took Mary and the child Jesus by night, and I fled to Egypt. Just as the other Joseph was forced to go to Egypt because others meant evil against him, what others intended for evil, God intended for good. While we were in Egypt, King Herod died, and another angel appeared to me in a dream and said, Rise, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel. For those who sought the child's life are dead. God intended this for good, so that the words of the prophet Hosea might be fulfilled in the life of Jesus, which says, When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son.
Do you see the characters of Joseph? Though they lived nearly 1,800 years apart, they are both named Joseph, both sons of a man named Jacob, both Israelites. Each of them faced a false allegation of misconduct, and both of them were innocent, and both of them did what was considered honorable. And each received revelation and deliverance from God through dreams 3 separate times. And through the faithfulness of both of these men, God brought about a great deliverance for the people of Israel. And just as we see the similarities between these two Josephs, there are also similarities between the foreign rulers who oppressed Israel during the birth of Moses and the birth of Jesus. Listen to the parallels between the actions of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and the Roman governor, King Herod.
I am Pharaoh, king of Egypt. I ruled all the lands of Egypt, and I ruled over the people of Israel as slaves at the time when Moses was born. When the people of Israel began to multiply in the land, I perceived them as a threat. Therefore, I said to my advisors, "Behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply, and, if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land." Perceiving this threat from Israel, I commanded the Hebrew midwives to kill the male children of Israel. But they deceived me and did not do as I commanded, and the Hebrew people multiplied even more. Therefore, I commanded all the people of Egypt to kill all the male children born to the Hebrews, ordering the male children to be thrown into the Nile. Despite my efforts, my plot to have the male children killed ultimately failed, for the Hebrew child Moses was hidden in a basket by his mother and sister Miriam. When my daughter discovered the child in a basket among the reeds of the Nile, she ordered the child's own mother to wean him, and then my own daughter raised the Hebrew child Moses as a son.
My name is King Herod. I am a Roman official who ruled over the people of Israel under the authority of Caesar Augustus at a time when Jesus was born. After Jesus was born, Magi came from the east to Jerusalem, and they told me that they had seen a star as a sign in the heavens, and they asked where the King of the Jews had been born. For they desired to worship him. Like Pharaoh before me, I then perceived this new king and the people of Israel as a threat. Therefore I told the Magi to find the child and send word to me so that I would know where the child was. I told the Magi that I desired to worship Jesus, but what I really wanted was to find out where the child was so that I could kill him and end the threat he represented as a rival king. When I learned that I had been deceived by the Magi and that they had returned home by another way, I failed to learn from them where this King Jesus was. I became furious, and when I learned at what time the star had appeared, I slaughtered the male children of Israel in Bethlehem and the entire surrounding region, just as Pharaoh had done to the Israelites in the past. However, my efforts to kill Jesus only aided in the fulfillment of a prophecy given by the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be comforted because they are no more. Just as Pharaoh's order to kill the Hebrew baby boys failed to kill Moses, so too my efforts to kill the Hebrew baby boys in and around Bethlehem failed to kill the child Jesus. Instead, Joseph and Mary and Jesus fled to Egypt and remained in that Roman province in a place beyond my jurisdiction until after I had died.
Do you see it, church? Do you see how Pharaoh and Herod are similar? Both ruled over Israel as oppressors when a child of promise was born. Both perceived Israel as a threat, and both killed the male children of Israel in order to try and squash that threat. And both of their efforts failed because God provided a way out for both baby Moses and baby Jesus. This next connection requires a bit of an explanation because we lose some important information in translation. The older sister of Moses was named Miriam, and Miriam did many important things alongside her mother to save the life of Moses when he was a baby. In a similar way, Mary, the mother of Jesus, acted bravely to save the life of baby Jesus. However, Mary's given name, as recorded in the Greek New Testament, is not Mary, but Mariam. Mariam is an Aramaic name that was borrowed into Greek in Matthew's Gospel account. The name Mariam is in reality an Aramaic version of the Hebrew name Miriam. So just as Joseph and Joseph shared the same name, Miriam, the older sister of Moses, and Mary, the mother of Jesus, share the same Hebrew name, Miriam. Take a look.
My name is Miriam. I am the daughter of Amram and Jochebed. I'm an Israelite of the tribe of Levi, and I lived as a slave in Egypt. When I was younger, my mother hid my baby brother Moses when Pharaoh, king of Egypt, tried to kill all the Hebrew baby boys. She hid him for 3 months, and when she could hide him no longer, she placed him in this basket, sealed with pitch, and hid him in the reeds of the Nile. She commanded me to watch over him and protect him from harm. This protection was fitting, for I am his sister, related to him by blood. Therefore, when Pharaoh's daughter found Moses in the basket, I stepped in and suggested that she give the child to me and have his mother nurse him until he was weaned. By stepping in when I did, I saved Moses from a murderous plot. And through my courageous actions, God spared Moses and would raise him up to lead a great deliverance for all the people of Israel. And when Moses grew up, God called him to lead the Israelites in the Exodus, escaping Egypt through the Red Sea on dry ground. In this way, I received deliverance alongside my fellow Israelites as God delivered us from the hand of Pharaoh and our Egyptian overlords. After we had escaped through the Red Sea, God closed the waters over Pharaoh and his chariots, ensuring our freedom. And I, Miriam the prophetess, led all the women of Israel in a mighty song of deliverance, playing tambourine, dancing, singing. Ashir ala Adonai mi galgal, Ashir ala Adonai ki galgal, mi chamoka ba'elim Adonai, mi chamoka ne'ar ba'kodesh, b'kira v'kashtaka amzugalta. Nakira v'kashtaka amzugalta, Ashira, Ashira, Ashira. I will sing unto the Lord, He is triumph glorious, He the horse and rider thrown into the sea. I will sing unto the Lord, for He is triumph glorious, He the horse and rider thrown into the sea. The Lord my God, my strength, my song, for now become my victory. The Lord my God, my strength, my song, for now become my victory. The Lord is good, I will praise Him, my Father is God. I will exalt Him, the Lord is God. I will praise Him, my Father is God. I will exalt Him. I will sing unto the Lord, He is triumph glorious, He the horse and rider thrown into the sea. I will sing unto the Lord, for He has triumphed gloriously, the horse and rider thrown into the sea. The Lord my God, my strength, my song, has now become my victory. The Lord my God, my strength, my song, has now become my victory. The Lord is God, I will praise Him, my Father is God. I will exalt Him, the Lord is God. things, I, Miriam, was raised in high esteem and honored among women and all of Israel alongside my brothers Aaron and Moses.
My name is Mary, but my given Aramaic name is Mariam, which is a variation on the Hebrew name Miriam. I am pledged to be married to Joseph, and I was chosen by God to give birth to Jesus, the Messiah. Just as Miriam watched over baby Moses in a basket in the Nile, I found myself in a stable, watching over baby Jesus in a manger. Just as Miriam was related to baby Moses by blood as an older sister, I too am related to Jesus the prophet, like Moses, by blood, because I am his birth mother. When Joseph was warned in a dream to flee to Egypt because Herod was looking to destroy my child, we took baby Jesus and fled as we were instructed. Just as Miriam protected Moses from a plot to kill the Hebrew boys, I fled to Egypt with Joseph, rescuing Jesus from a murderous plot. Just as Miriam received deliverance from God when the Israelites escaped through the Red Sea, so too was I rescued